Hi, welcome to Laura's View and Tarot 2. I am so glad you're here. Today's date is Monday, August 4th, 2025. Well, as you can tell by the title I gave to this video, we're going to be doing an exploration into the possibility of some major seismic activity occurring in the near future. The reason I'm doing that, I watched a really good video by Dutch Sense, and there's a link to it in the video description box this weekend. And he was talking in a very non-alarmist fashion about how much earthquake activity is rather predictable and follows a pattern, and that there's clues to when there's activity that's ramping up, etc. Now, there's a few things that I'd like to mention in addition to what Dutch had to offer in his video. First of all, over the past week, the earth has rumbled in dramatic ways. From the Friday, an earthquake was felt in New York City, which is not on a major fault line, but it is on the North America craton. And also in Russia, there was an 8.8, the sixth largest earthquake in recorded history. Now let's talk about that recorded history. There's limits to what we have recorded. We are going through a period where planets are in alignment that they haven't been in thousands of years. There's some major solar activity going on that people are tracking, and there is some evidence. It's not enough to be considered settled science. The solar activity can also have an effect on seismic activity. Now, we know that on the west coast of the United States, there's the Ring of Fire, and along that, the what I consider the far end of that, since I'm in the United States, there's Japan that is prone to some major seismic activity, as well as Indonesia, which is and doesn't always have the infrastructure to deal with it, for example, the tsunamis that tend to follow seismic activity. So I thought it might be a really good time to explore the possibility of some major earthquake activity in the near future, and that's what we'll do in this video. But just wanted to make the point that seismic activity is ongoing and a constant. We're thinking that there may be some anomalous or unusual activity, and would like to get some insights from the universe about that before we do. Now, one of the things that I worry about, and I'll give you a little background on why I worry about it, is just in the last day, there was a magnitude, I believe, what was it? The New York one was 3.0, but there was a 8.8 in Russia. And just last night, there was another 6 point something one in Russia again. My worry is that with earthquake activity, that those aren't the big ones, that those are the precursors. So if we have the sixth largest earthquake in recorded history happening in Russia along the Ring of Fire there, and which means that the resulting activity is going to definitely have some effect on the United States, possibly on down to Japan and Indonesia, etc. And if it's actually a case of the continental plates, the North America craton, and I hope I'm saying that right. I hope I am. If I'm not, fun with it, okay? Craton. Um, while it's usually very stable, the fact that there was a rumbling, even of a small magnitude in New York, um, does call into question, at least in my mind, that are the plates actually doing some unusual shifting or getting ready to have some unusual activity, unusual for recorded history. Now, what I think is really, really interesting is there is also some evidence that suggests that earthquakes exhibit a memory effect where fluctuations in magnitude, depth, and inter-event distances indicate a non-random process. So, is there a memory effect going on, and we're coming into a period of activity that's happened before and will happen again, but hasn't happened in recorded history? That's what I would like to ask the universe about. Now, as many of you know, I lived in Alaska for almost 30 years, and earthquakes were an almost daily event there. I was there in 2018 when there was a 7.1 magnitude earthquake on November 30th, 2018. And that was quite an event. Now, to me, it felt stronger than that because it was only a depth of 25 miles. And I was driving to school. The road was twisting and turning, and buildings were swaying, and It was a big event and it caused a lot of PTSD for Alaska residents at the time. And we were used to smaller regular quakes. I mean, people don't even stop what they're doing on a 4.0. But when you get to 7.0 or higher, it's major, it's significant, and the aftershocks, which can be very close in range to the big shock, are something to deal with too. So I think it's good for us to be aware that there may be a possibility for some not just an uptick, but an uptick in major earthquake activity. If you're in an area where you already know you're earthquake prone, to have a plan and have your reactions kind of pre-planned, and that helps. For example, with me in 2018, I looked overhead to make sure there were no power lines that I was under. I saw that there was a building to the left of me that didn't seem to be earthquake proof. There was no split in the road I was on. I was on um, a side street off of Main Street, and I pulled forward uh, 50 feet to get out of range of that building if it collapsed. So again, I was kind of thinking as I went, making sure I wouldn't be under any downed power lines, things like that. And then I just rode it out after I thought I was clear of what that building was. I didn't make any moves to go farther than that. I stayed in my vehicle until it was all done and then went on to work. And then we saw some stories of heroics. Okay. We saw teachers out there in below zero weather keeping kids safely on buses because the buildings had to be checked out and reuniting them with families as they could make it through damaged roads and stuff to get their kids. There were stores didn't close. The clerks put on hard hats and offered to go into the damaged aisles and retrieve needed items, especially on the baby aisle and water and things like that. There were a lot of times that people stepped up and did the right thing during that. There were a few instances where they didn't, too. There was a fist fight in one of the stores over the last case of fresh water because when you have a major earthquake, there's a lot of sediment in the water lines, both the city and wells, that is shaken up, and it takes several days to settle down. So there were people that were caught short on water. I say all that to you because if we're coming up to a time where there's a potential for some earthquake activity and it's not typical for your area, hearing a story like this is going to help you start a mental plan of having that extra case of water so you don't even have to go in the store or get involved in a fight for the last clean water, and just a readiness of, oh yeah, look at this, look at that. If you're in an area that hasn't got the infrastructure for earthquakes like they do on the West Coast, have a plan for what you do if there's an unusual earthquake in your area. Okay, what you would do, where you would go, where you would seek shelter. Would you, stand in a doorway? That used to be the old tried and true method. I think there's some better options now out there. But again, having a plan and saying, hey, if it starts to shake here, even though it's a little unusual for it, I still know what I'm going to do, and I know what I'll do after. Okay. So let's see if the universe kind of confirms that this is something we need to have kind of in our mental toolkit ready to deal with and deal with in a very positive, healthy, kind, loving, and as much as possible prepared way. I'm going to switch the camera, ask the cards a question, and we'll discover together what the universe wants us to know. In the last week, there's been significant seismic activity along the Ring of Fire and even along here in the United States, along the continental plate. And that's usually very stable and not prone to seismic activity. We'd like to ask the universe if we're coming on a time when we can expect an 8.0 or larger magnitude seismic event, if these are precursors of a larger event that's coming, plus additional insights and information. Okay, we've got the Two of Pentacles, the World. So I'm already being told, first of all, it's always a reassuring card, but these cards today are going to be talking about the world, not just the United States, and that's fine with me. Okay, Queen of Swords, the Hanged Man, King of Swords, another two with the Two of Cups, and 10 of Swords. Okay. Well, what I'm getting here with the cards as they're coming out, first of all, again, we're getting some information on a global scale, so I may do a second read and ask for a little more rundown on that. Um, I'm thinking the Ring of Fire is kind of going to be the hot spot for the world, but it's going to extend past that. Yeah, we're going to be looking at some seismic activity in a whole new way. And part of it, again, is because there are limits to what we have in recorded history. So we may be coming on an unexpected interim of seismic activity for us, even if it's part of a long flowing cycle for our world. The Queen of Swords for the recent past talks about clear thinking. And again, as I was saying when I was relating some of my story from 2018, didn't panic, kept my wits about me, kind of already had a plan and things I needed to know to look for. Fissures in the road, power lines overhead, buildings that might collapse, that kind of thing. I had a plan and didn't have any warning that it was going to go into effect. I was in the middle of driving to work. And so have a plan. That clear thinking is going to be what is going to keep any damage or harm to the absolute minimum, wherever you might be. The two of Pentacles being our indicator for the question, I think, yeah, we're getting that. Not only the fact that these two Pentacles would be rolling in this um, uh, apparatus that they're in, I think, yeah, we've got pretty good chance of this happening. And again, not just in the United States, so the rest of the world may be impacted. Let's look forward to the near future, get some advice and insights, and I'll pull two more cards. And then I might quickly ask a question and layer it into regions so we get a little more information from the universe about where the hotspots might be. Okay, so let's take a look at the near future here. We've got the King of Swords here saying that actually as much readiness as possible is being done on preparedness levels, whether it's your local or, in fact, I have a feeling they've got some intel and know that there's something is coming, and so that preparedness is going on here. I say that because the Two of Cups talks about agreement and communication, and and the Ten of Swords is talking about ending. Often it talks about losses, and where seismic activity often results in tsunami activity. We've got this big body of water here. So again, yeah, something big is coming. We've got the Four of Swords and the High Priestess. Again, kind of a nod to the fact that there's information out there on this that is being kept from the general public. So interesting. Something big enough coming that they think the general public either can't handle it or doesn't need to know. So I'm going to stop the camera and for just a second and start the shuffling process so it's really good. My next question, we're going to do this into regions. So we're going to have the United States for the top row, the specific to the close within 100 miles of the Ring of Fire, because that'll get us down into Japan, and then Indonesia. So we got United States, since that's where I'm from, Ring of Fire, which we'll do from Alaska down to about Japan, and then Indonesia for the third row. Okay, be right back. Okay, again, I will be pulling cards. At the top row is for the United States. The middle row is for the Ring of Fire, which still includes the United States. That'll be Alaska, some of the Pacific Northwest, etc. But going on down, if you follow the Ring of Fire, it borders Russia and on down to Japan. So there, and then Indonesia, because they seem to be quite at risk for not being prepared and with low-lying elevations, just not able to get to high ground, etc., and maybe not building for shakes and quakes. So let's see, three cards in each row, and then I'll pull a fourth one on each one for keep your focus on after we talk about those. Okay, we have the US Star card, Knight of Cups, and the Two of Wands. For the Ring of Fire, which also still includes some of the United States, we have the Nine of Cups, the Three of Swords, and the Ace of Wands. So the Ring of Fire is a hot spot. Then for Indonesia, we have the Five of Cups, the World, and the Seven of Wands. Okay, so it looks like asking for the United States, that would include the entire continent. The entire continent doesn't seem to be at elevated risk for a magnitude 8.0 or higher, which is nice news for those of you that live like in Wyoming, where Yellowstone is. So that doesn't seem to be where the risk factor is. It is on the Ring of Fire. We got a hard yes on that. The Ring of Fire is going to be very, very active. There is going to be some loss of life as a result. And I'm thinking this nine is saying that they're going to get a 9.0, which would definitely be in the top 10 for recorded magnitudes, somewhere along that Ring of Fire. It's going to exceed that 8.8 we had last week. So we are due for it along the Ring of Fire. Indonesia is going to suffer some loss of life again just from the infrastructure, low elevations, etc. So whatever mitigation efforts they've done in the past or plans that have worked for people to get out of harm's way or seek high ground, etc., to avoid damage, it'd be good to have a plan. And it looks like if there's going to be a nice response from people trying to help them recover. So recovery efforts will be well supported no matter where this damage occurs. Now, for each of these regions, for those of you that live in them or are affected by them, let's see what the universe wanted you to know as far as keep your focus on. For the United States, Page of Cups. Count your blessings. Just know that we'll get off easy in some of these dramatic seismic events, and we need to be prepared to help our neighbors. And that means beyond geography borders. We're not, yeah, help your neighbor in your neighborhood, but the world needs to come together and help one another wherever there's need. For those living along the Ring of Fire, including my loved ones in Alaska and on down into Japan, the Magician. Okay, you need to be as prepared as possible. You're going to be able to manifest. In fact, there's some mitigation efforts that are really, really good that are going to help keep damage to. And again, experience is a good teacher. So people along the Ring of Fire are used to these quakes and shakes, but they do, when they get to a magnitude above 7, they get daunting, even if you've had experience with quakes. And this card is saying, those of you that are powerful manifestors, and we all are, but not all of us accept it yet, being mindful of just saying, I intend to have the best possible positive outcome of these events with the least possible damage to life and property. Okay. Now, for those of you who may be watching from Indonesia, I know I do get a few from all over. Again, we got the Knight of Pentacles for you to keep your focus on, and that is just plan. Know what's worked in the past. Plan to use it again in the future. Okay, and again, a little bit of that preparedness is going to go a long way. If you know in past events there's been a shortage of fresh water, try to have some ready. If you know that what's been in short supply when there have been other events, have yourself as ready as possible. Okay, and so there we have it. You can be prepared to help. Be prepared to step in, and let's try to do some manifesting of getting through this time of seismic turmoil and channeling that energy from the seismic events in as positive a way as possible. And again, preparedness for those of you in Indonesia. Let's recap. There's been an uptick in seismic activity, and in the last week, we being citizens of planet Earth, had the sixth most intense earthquake happen in the over in Russia in the last week in recorded history. Now, there's some limits to recorded history, and some things that are going on right now go beyond what our recorded history entails. For example, we've got some unusual solar activity going on. There is some evidence that solar activity can have an effect on seismic actions. There is also the fact that there are some constellation shifts and changes, planetary changes, which, if the moon can affect our tides and the water, if we have some planets in a configuration they haven't been in before, it is not beyond the pale to think that that may have some sort of effect as far as what's going on with the planet and the uptick in seismic activity. Now, you can't stop an earthquake from happening, but you can have a plan for how to best get through it. And we thought it might be wise, since there are some factors that aren't necessarily considered hard science that may be impacting this potential for seismic activity. Let's ask the universe. Are these events of the last week, the 8.8, the 6.2, the 5 point whatever, are those actually the pre-quakes, not big ones that are letting off steam and it's going to settle down? Is there a bigger event that's on the near horizon? We got a yes for that. It was. And it did say, the universe let me know with the world card showing up that it was talking about the world. It wasn't just a US specific response. So I did a second read and I divided the cards up into the United States, continental United States, the Ring of Fire, which still does extend into the Pacific Northwest and Alaska as far as where it impacts, and then on around. And we asked for within 100 miles of that Ring of Fire, so not too far inland, but within 100 miles of the Ring of Fire. And then Indonesia, because they seem to be rather infrastructure-wise not ready for big events and do seem to have problems when there's tsunamis because there's low elevations, etc., things like that. Some of the resulting activity that happens after seismic events. And it looked like the hot spot for the near future is going to be along the Ring of Fire. So there was yeah, definitely we got a hard yes on that for the Ring of Fire. And keep your focus on manifesting, okay, readiness, preparedness, and a willingness to help friends and neighbors afterwards. But the Ring of Fire is going to have some loss of life regardless from what's happening. It looks like we may get a magnitude along that Ring of Fire of 9.0. So, and that's significant. That would be close to what Alaska had with the 64 earthquake. And so, like I said, 7 or more, you really get you get you get damage, you get trauma, and the aftershocks are really something to deal with too. We had hundreds of them after that 7.1, and some of those were as strong as regular earthquakes are that are considered, damaging, etc. So the Indonesia, though, it's going to have more loss of life. Again, they're kind of like below the tail, or what I think of as the tail of the Ring of Fire. So right there at either the end point or the starting point, depending on how you look at it geographically. And this was where the world card showed up again, saying, yeah, this is it. So the Ring of Fire, and within 100 miles of the Ring of Fire, and Indonesia is going to have some damage that we're going to need to help them recoup from. So that's what the universe had to advise for us. Again, you can't stop some things from happening. You can be as mentally ready as you can to deal with them. And sometimes it's wise to just realize, like I know now, that no matter how prepared I think I am to mentally handle things, I still pat myself on the back for checking for power lines over my car, and looking at the buildings and doing a mental gauge of, if they collapse, am I in a danger zone for a collapse? But there were some things I wasn't ready for. So no matter if you just realize, there's limits to your readiness, and you need to be ready to accept that and deal with it, that helps too. That's it for this video. I thank you so much for your time, attention, and viewership. If you're willing to receive it, I send you love, light, and I wish for you everything bright.